We will now turn to our panel on services and digital powering the economies, and it will be moderated by Amanda Denton, BSA.
I welcome that all of us leaders to come on up and take a seat. I don't. Great to see you y'all here. I'm waiting for one more. So thank you. That was we've heard some wonderful remarks already today, and it's an honor for me to be here with this group. So let me just quickly introduce. We have Rory Heslington, Vice President of Government Affairs for Autos Drive America. Don Neuffer is President and CEO of the Semiconductor Industry Association. We have Enrique Benavides, Global Government Engagement Senior Manager with Visa. And finally, John Drummond, Head of Trade Policy with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here. And I just want to say that it's so important for us to talk about how specifically these issues affect the different industries that we all represent in the US. And I think coming from the perspective of the video game industry, you know, we're an industry based on the First Amendment and free speech and engagement and entertainment and play. And all of that is also on the foundation of digital services and the ability to offer those services responsibly in many markets, often all at the same time. I mean, many of the industries here on the panel are engaging with my sector on a live basis. And we rely on this kind of American ideal of entertainment and free speech with players from around the world. So it's a very real example in my mind. And I guess I just would like to, I hope to hear from each of you about how do we tell the story in a way that responds to all of the concerns that we're hearing today. How do we tell the story of the importance of digital trade to each of us in a way that really resonates with the problems that we're all addressing right now? So Rory, I'll let you begin. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Rory Heslington with Autos Drive America. We're a newer association. We launched in 2020, but we represent the U.S. operations of the 12 international automakers that are here in the U.S. Most people probably don't know, but my companies operate over 75 research and development facilities in the U.S. Many of the companies house all of their design and data collection services here in the U.S. And so I think that's what I'm here to talk about, is that this is the digital trade and services are broader than just big tech. It's down to manufacturing, you know, and even up our supply chain with smaller suppliers. There's a lot of services that go into that. So it's collecting things like vehicle safety data and telematics and collecting that and analyzing it, you know, and at the headquarters in Japan, Germany, Korea, Sweden, wherever they may be, transferring that back over to the US, putting that back into designs, and that you know applies to safety and all sorts of improvements that can be done in the automotive sector.
John?
Thanks, Amanda. Live mics on both sides. Okay.
You're good.
Christy, thanks for asking me back for another year, for tolerating me. I just want to say, Christy, you've just done an amazing job at CSI. As someone who runs an association, I know that there's some challenges there, and you've done a great job with this association over the years. Congratulations. So why are we here? A little bit like Rory, because what you guys do is critically important to us, particularly when it comes to ensuring free flow of data across borders. You know, we manufacture stuff, but to get to that point, we do a lot. We rely very, very heavily on our data being able to cross borders. Primarily services. We have teams of engineers all around the world. 20% of our design workforce is in India. The data, the design function literally never sleeps, constantly moving around the world. There's also for the manufacturing itself and the back end assembly tests, there's chemical formulas, manufacturing data, all sorts of IP that keeps moving around the world and needs to move around the world, tariff free. Critically important to us that this doesn't get interrupted because it affects our ability to thrive and innovate. So I think, you know, over the past few years, we've been teaming up with Christie and a larger coalition to do things like try to make sure that the e-commerce moratorium is extended. In fact, earlier this year, in something called the World Semiconductor Council, we put together a letter. We drove the effort, put together a letter to Indian leadership saying, what the heck? We need to extend the e-commerce moratorium. 20% of our workforce is in your country. We need to be able to get data in and out of your country tariff free. And that fortunately dropped into the press just as we were all heading out to Abu Dhabi. And I think it might have had a little bit of an impact on helping to drive the debate. And I guess if there's kind of one message I'd offer with that little exercise, it's that sometimes it's good to make sure that folks taking, I won't say misbehaving, but folks taking a direction that's not necessarily favorable for us on the moratorium, is sometimes you got to call them out and say, hey, what the heck? Just a couple of points before we move on here. First of all, you know, I know that the next WTO ministerial is a while, but I think we got to move very quickly to get kind of a plan in place to figure out what we're going to do with this moratorium. Of course, we would love to make it permanent. Not sure that's what we're going to end up. We certainly would love our government to think that. Another smaller point, information technology agreement, that has to do with hardware, which is what you guys are all built on. We would love to see that WTO agreement expanded. Recognize that there's one big player in the world that's not into market access these days. So we recognize we're probably not going to get coverage expanded, but let's get more members in the ITA. Or more members that are ITA 1, get them moved to ITA 2, like Vietnam. I think that could be very, very beneficial. The hardware moves across tariff free. That helps enable all of you guys out there to do your job better. And then finally, we can talk about a little bit later, and I raised this last year, but I just got to say it again. We got to, whether it's for digital trade or whether it's for hardware trade, we just got to get back in the business of opening markets around the world. Everyone's talking about rebalancing global markets. So if we're going to be doing that, we need to have alternative markets that are bigger and more expansive. That's one piece of it. The other piece of it is for the CHIPS Act, for example, we are embarked in a very ambitious, very important experiment in industrial policy. Seems to me logical that we should have a complementary trade policy to support that. Want to have more manufacturing here for semiconductors or any other industry. Doesn't it seem logical that we should try to make bigger markets overseas for the products we manufacture here? And that's where I think at a minimum, we should be embarking on market access trade agreements again, get back in the business of that. I hope that's enough to get started, Amanda.
That's great.
Great,
Thank you
thanks.
for that excellent perspective. John?
Thanks very much, Amanda. So we've heard from already some kind of industry examples, and I like the way you set it out, Amanda, about how do we tell the story about how services and digital trade powers the rest of the economy. So I'm coming from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, where, you know, we're doing more data-driven research and evidence-based. And what I can bring to the discussion is what a growing foundation of data and evidence is 21st century economy can tell us. And from the OECD's point of view, I would tell this story in, you know, basically 4 parts. It's service and digital trade increases competitiveness. It reduces the cost of doing business. It enhances productivity with follow-on benefits for workers. And in a lot of issues that governments are addressing today, it also contributes to economic security and de-risking. And the evidence behind that, some of it is old and some of it is new. But to start with on competitiveness, our work with measuring trade in value added terms, this is a well-known story already. But it bears repeating, is that services and digital content of manufacturing or agri-food exports contributes as much as 1/3 of value added in those exports. You can't export competitive manufacturing or agriculture sectors without quality services inputs. You just can't do it. So lower barriers to services equals more competitive exports, more secure jobs for workers in countries around the world. In terms of the cost of doing business, we've heard a couple mentions already. So today, there's some new evidence from the OECD has been published. We have a report on revitalizing services trade for global growth. And with the expanded database of evidence that is now available, we can do some very interesting economic modeling and calculate that a convergence towards best practices in terms of market openness and services domestic regulation can reduce the services trade cost by up to $1 trillion annually. So if you think about that, that's about 13% of global services trade annually. It would be measures that governments can take in a coordinated manner that can boost all components of domestic economies and with follow-on benefits across manufacturing, strategic sectors, agriculture and agri-food sectors. So I think this bears taking a closer look at it as something that can help to reinvigorate services trade agenda going forward. You can take that analysis, and the OECD has done a little bit farther to look at productivity benefits. Reform scenarios, as we described, can lead to productivity gains, labor productivity in particular. This is good news for workers if governments were to pursue such a policy, creating better working conditions, higher wages, and more stable jobs. And a last word just on linking services and digital trade to security and supply chain resilience and the de-risking agenda. So a lot of what we see at the OECD is efforts to coordinate and cooperate amongst like-minded countries, so like OECD member countries, in specific strategic sectors and targeted in those areas, whether it's on critical raw materials or semiconductors or other strategic technologies. In order to make that kind of de-risking and like-minded cooperation economically viable, you need to have these kind of these services cost reductions that make that more possible. So I think that linking in services and digital trade to that agenda as well helps to make the case for a reinvigorated services agenda. So I mean, our message is we hope to see, we're planting the seeds for a stronger services trade agenda going forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And what a great coincidence to have your study coming out today as we're all here to talk about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. Enrique, how about you?
Thank you. Just on your question about the narrative, I will provide some insights on from the digital payments perspective, and specifically an ongoing shift to digital payments and how this shift is really driving consumer spending, accelerating economic activity across all sectors of the economy around the world, and really providing access to the digital economy for micro, small, medium enterprises and consumers. What we really saw as a trend during the pandemic really has become a permanent behavior for consumers and small businesses. And companies like Visa has really been adapting digital payments to the needs, realities, and expectations of small businesses. Specifically for small businesses, as you know, are over 90% of all businesses and account for 50% of all jobs. For them, really digital enabled services, specifically those that enable cross-border e-commerce, really are key drivers of resilience and economic recovery, specifically after the pandemic. Visa has done over the years many studies at a macro level on the impact of digital payments across economies and across sectors. Most specifically, we had partnered with Moody on studies over 70 countries looking at the impact of digital payments, and we found globally greater use of digital payments have added about $245 billion of GDP on a 4-year period right before the pandemic. This has translated to about 2.1 million jobs every year. Other studies, such as like from Boston Consultant, estimates that widespread adoption of digital payments can add about 1% of GDP annually for developed economies and 3% for emerging economies. In the case of the US economy, that can mean up to $257 billion added to yearly GDP. Given this impact of digital payments on economies, companies like Visa, again, has adopted payments, but has been very intentional just in terms of how we develop specific sectors, leveraging our global expertise and bringing our understanding of the local needs and partnerships with partners in different countries, and have, again, developed very specific sectors, such as agriculture. We have partnered in Bangladesh. We have seen progress in Bangladesh and in Argentina, where we have developed very specific solutions to support farmer needs, specifically when they need to purchase, when they need to sell their goods according to seasonality. In other sectors, such as healthcare, we have partnered with governments in Nigeria to reduce cash dependence and provide more flexibility for consumers to make payments and have more collections of premiums for the government. Another big sector that we've seen as well is just government services, how governments interact with their citizens. More and more, just the benefits of increased transparency and the collection of taxes. One example we have where we supported just Ukraine's vision of 100% of government services. We are enabling about 23 agencies in Ukraine government to provide support of their payments via app, which has been very successful and it's very key, especially right now during the war. Just as a reminder and to close, that all of these transactions from initiation, processing, and authorization relied on data and making just cross-border data flows a prerequisite to have efficient payments ecosystem.
Thank you so much. So I see we're coming to the end of our time, so I'm going to try to triage my questions for you. I'm going to ask my first question on behalf of Visa and the autos industries.
Okay.
So this one is if you might be able to just talk with me about, we've seen a pause on the negotiation of digital trade provisions recently from the administration. And I was just wondering if you could speak to how you think this maybe already has or could affect your sectors in the global economy.
I guess I'll start. I mean, I don't think we've seen any impact directly yet, but I mean, the automotive industry is in one of the biggest transitions in its history right now, and vehicles are becoming more connected. There's much more services going into the vehicles, and if data flows and this pause and change in the U.S. position on digital trade continues to head in the wrong direction, it's going to make companies, especially like mine, who are headquartered overseas, reevaluate where they're going to do this stuff. It may not be the only thing that is in that equation, but it becomes a piece of that equation when you're making these decisions of where to put money and where to do the research, where to house data, where all of these things. And I think that's the danger of this pause or whatever direction the government's taking.
Mm-hmm. Enrique?
Yes, I think for Visa, even before the decision, there have been so many efforts to localize infrastructure or to localize data. I think that this definitely accelerates some of that pace. And I think as an initial stage, again, it accelerates, but it just introduces more risk. Companies like Visa really depend on 100% trust and security of transactions. And if we think about localizing data in different parts of the world, it just introduces a lot of risk and vulnerabilities into the business model.
Thank you. Okay, and then finally, for the two Johns on the stage, Mr. Drummond, if you might talk about what are your really one or two top policy recommendations for trade and digital and services? If you could make one or two for us today.
Okay, just very quickly, on this question about negotiating, e-commerce going forward. Are we gonna sit back and let others lead on this and lose all sorts of opportunities or not? So I think that's where we are. It's a lot evolving, a lot of trade agreements around the world being put together, and, we don't lead, others well. And I think for, let's see, I wrote down a couple of things. Yeah, I already mentioned it already.
It was,
No.
I was hoping you could restate them because
I think,
were
I
very
think, I think the key point is, and I see we got 1 minute here, so I'll make this 10 seconds. Again, as we take forward various policies in the US, such as industrial policy focused on chips, but there's all sorts of other policies that need to have complementary trade policy to make them more potent. That needs to be part of the mix as we think about all the stuff we're doing here in Washington. We need to think about what can complement that with good, aggressive, positive trade policy. And I just don't think we're there right now.
All right, and finally, from your perspective, do you have one piece of advice for our trade policy or two?
I think, you know, as we've heard today, you know, there's a lot of risks in the global economy, fragmentation of digital regulation. What I've tried to describe is some missed opportunities in terms of economic benefits that are not being fully seized. So I hope that the event that CSI has organized today, one of the main takeaways should be an absolutely fundamental need to reinvigorate a services trade agenda, a digital trade agenda, and that requires US leadership, but it requires coordinated efforts across like-minded countries to work in the same direction in multiple fora, multilaterally, plurilaterally, and bilaterally. I think, you know, it's the group of people in this room that are really going to drive that agenda. So I'm glad we're having that discussion today, and I'm glad to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate all of your contributions.